The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of my bedroom, casting faint shadows across the familiar walls I had known for decades. I woke with the usual ache in my joints and a heaviness that was not just physical, but something lodged deeper, in the hollow places within me. The house was too quiet, a silence that pressed against my ears as if waiting. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the worn floorboards creaking softly beneath my weight. Another day greeted me, another day to linger at the edges of my own family's life. For years, I had carried my role with unyielding dedication, the steady mother, the nurturing grandmother, the caregiver who never wavered. How many dinners had I prepared, carefully balancing kindness with the hope of some recognition? How many times had I watched my son Nathan laugh alongside Jessica, his wife, while I remained a ghost in the background? The years had layered, and so had the invisible walls they built around me. The morning passed with its quiet hum of routine. I set the table with deliberate care, recalling how once my voice had carried authority and warmth in this very room. The memories slipped like fine sand through my fingers, elusive and retreating. I dressed in the clothes my husband had once helped me pick out, feeling the weight of time in the fabric, nothing flashy, just comfortable and familiar. I was Eleanor Harris, they said, but lately, it felt as if I was someone else entirely or no one at all. The ache in my chest deepened as the hour approached for the family dinner. Nathan always said I would find my place in the coming years, but coming years had morphed into decades. Jessica had grown colder with each encounter, her sarcasm sharpening and cutting deeper than the polite society allowed its members to admit. I had learned to swallow the pinpricks, to offer a smile that masked the sting, but tonight was different. Tonight, the air seemed charged with a tension I could not quiet. We gathered around the dining table, a stage where alliances were uneasily maintained and battles disguised as pleasantries took place. The food was warm, the conversation strained my presence, almost a formality rather than a welcomed inclusion. I caught Jessica's eye as she sliced her steak with a precise, ruthless efficiency. A flicker of disdain passed her features before she turned to Nathan, ignoring me deliberately. Eleanor, her voice was smooth but iced, carrying the kind of contempt that was both open and cruel. Why don't you act your age instead of meddling in things you don't understand? The sentence dropped like a hammer, sharp and echoing. The room seemed to hold its breath. My fork clattered against my plate, but I did not react. Shock was the first wave, crashing and retreating inside me. Then humiliation wrapped its heavy cloak around my shoulders, a silent accusation that cut deeper than any spoken word. There was a hush, thick and suffocating. Nathan shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze, while Jessica's lips curled in a faintly triumphant smile. The children, my beloved grandchildren, looked away, sensing something unspoken but too complex for their young eyes. The warmth of family had turned cold, the ties that bound us frayed by years of neglect and simmering resentment. I felt my pulse quicken, a mixture of hurt and an unfamiliar surge of defiance rising like heat beneath my skin. For so long, I had been the quiet presence, the background figure who endured the sharp glances and whispered judgments. But this moment, this single cutting remark, unraveled the seams of my patience. In that instant, I glimpsed the truth laid bare. I was no longer a pillar in this family, no longer the woman whose story was woven into their lives with respect and affection. I was invisible. The dinner continued in a shallow murmur, but I sat rigid, my mind racing. Years spent sacrificing my own dreams, setting aside desires for their comfort and success, now felt like shadows of an unclaimed legacy. How had I become a marginal note in my own story? The pain was a wound, but beneath it, a seed of determination took root. No longer would I allow myself to fade into silence, to be pushed aside with careless words. As the plates were cleared and the family dispersed, I remained seated a moment longer, the silence around me thick but no longer oppressive. It held a different meaning now, a space for decision, for quiet resolve. The night ahead promised solitude, but also clarity. In the stillness, I recognized a stirring within me, a will to reclaim my space, to rewrite the narrative where I was no longer unseen. The invisible woman, the dismissed mother-in-law, those roles would no longer define me. Respect might be earned silently, yes, but I was done waiting for acknowledgement that would never come of its own accord. The game had shifted, and with every beat of my heart, I felt the quiet roar of a storm about to break. That evening, I lay awake long after the house softened into sleep, memories and possibilities weaving together in the dark. A fire that had smoldered beneath years of quiet endurance grew brighter. I no longer felt like a shadow shrinking in the periphery. I was a woman awakening to the gravity of her own strength, methodical, patient, and ready to emerge from the silence that had bound me for too long. Night deepened around the house, thick with silence, but sleep remained elusive. My mind was a restless sea, waves of memory and reflection crashing one after another. Each thought pulled me into the past. Years filled with sacrifices given without complaint, dreams quietly folded away in the corners of my heart, and a love that had shaped my family's world, even as they turned their backs on me. I traced the outline of those years with slow, deliberate care, feeling the weight and the worth of all I'd done and all I'd lost. When Nathan was still a boy, his laughter filling our home with joy, I was the center of this family. The house teemed with life and warmth, every corner steeped in the rhythm of shared moments, birthdays, anniversaries, quiet Sunday afternoons. I was the steady force behind it all, managing the household's demands, juggling schedules, and smoothing over tensions that threatened to fracture us. My hands moved with purpose, arranging meals, planning events, keeping track of appointments. The role was demanding, but I embraced it willingly, for love and for legacy. Yet that devotion, the hallmark of my identity, slowly morphed into chains. The affection I once received dissipated into distance and neglect. Jessica's sharp words and dismissive looks grew more frequent, more pointed. Nathan's eyes that once sparkled with warmth diverted to his wife, shutting me out. I became an afterthought, a minor character in a story I had helped write. The woman who had woven the fabric of this family into something resilient and strong was now unseen. The sting of invisibility gnawed deep, hollowing out the space I once occupied. I sat with those painful questions deep into the night. Had my years of love and sacrifice been in vain? Was my presence now unwanted, my voice silent? The ache was raw, but amidst the hurt, a seed of determination quietly took root. I was done being the unseen, the dismissed mother-in-law, the token figure who endured their scorn in silence. Wrapped tightly in my favorite blanket, I sought refuge in familiar comforts. Yet beneath the softness, my thoughts turned to the dreams I had stifled long ago, dreams of independence, of taking control, of creating a place for myself beyond the roles imposed by family and societal expectation. Those hopes had been pushed aside for decades, tucked away behind curtains of duty and self-denial. But now, those dormant ambitions stirred once more. My eyes drifted to the locked drawer in my study, where my late husband's prudent savings lay hidden. Those funds, quietly set aside to secure my golden years, suddenly represented more than mere security. They symbolized possibility, a lifeline to a future I could craft for myself. The thought that I might use this hidden treasury to build something of my own, something thoughtful and deliberate, ignited a spark within me, a flame of quiet rebellion ready to grow. There would be no harsh voices, no bitter arguments from me. I resolved to reclaim my place not through confrontation, but with patient strategy. The power I sought was in silence shaped by will, in presence forged by calm resolve and thoughtful action. I would no longer wait for recognition to come from others. I would build it myself. I considered the skills I had cultivated over the years, ones that stretched beyond managing a household, the business acumen I gained during my earlier career in administration, the keen observation that had served me in countless negotiations and decisions, the meticulous patience with which I navigated complicated family dynamics. These tools had not disappeared, they simply awaited revival. Carefully, I mapped out a plan in my mind to study Jessica's company, to uncover the weaknesses obscured by ambition and haste, to find gaps in her strategy that only a steady hand could exploit. This was going to be a chess game, not a shouting match. Every move would be precise, controlled, and measured. I would wait for the right moment to shift the game, and I would win without raising my voice. Memories of Miriam floated to the surface, an old business acquaintance whose sharp intellect and clear vision I had long admired. I saw in her the potential ally I would need, a discreet partner to help me navigate the startup world with wisdom and courage. Reconnecting with her felt both exciting and daunting, a venture beyond my comfort zone, but necessary for the future I intended to claim. As dawn painted the sky in soft pastels, I sat by the window, watching the world wake with the birds' tentative songs and the gentle rustling leaves. That quiet morning was a stark contrast to the storm of resolve stirring deep within me. I would no longer be relegated to the role of overlooked matriarch. I would become a force invisible no longer. I had learned long ago that speaks volumes. Power does not always roar with fury. Often, it whispers patiently, waiting for the perfect moment to act. Strength lies in those who watch, who listen, and who strike with confidence and clarity. I was ready to become that strength, steady, silent, unstoppable. The weight of all those years, once a heavy burden, now lay beneath me like solid ground, a foundation ready to support my next steps. I was no ghost. I was Eleanor Harris' mother, grandmother, a woman rising from the shadows to reclaim her rightful place with dignity and strength. Soft tears slipped down my cheeks. These were not tears of defeat, but of liberation, a cleansing of wounds long held inside. The silence that had once imprisoned me now stretched before me like a blank canvas on which I would paint a new story. I vowed to keep my plans secret, to move with discretion and care, unseen until the moment my silence became impossible to ignore. Respect, I told myself, is earned quietly, but this silence would be my strength, not my surrender. With my heart steady and resolve firm, I rose to meet the day. The journey ahead was uncertain, shadows lurking along the path. Yet with patience as my shield and determination as my sword, I was ready to write the next chapter of my story, and I would do so in silence that roared. The days that unfolded settled into a rhythmic pattern, each one a deliberate step toward the future I was determined to forge. The house thrummed with its usual life, the soft murmur of voices, footsteps padding across familiar floors, but beneath that everyday hum, a quiet revolution was stirring. I moved through my roles with calm resolve, a woman who had finally decided to reclaim her story. My first mission was to gather knowledge, to understand fully the world I intended to enter. The expansive realm of the internet became my trusted confidant, an endless repository of information waiting to be explored. I studied Jessica's startup carefully, peeling back its polished surface to reveal its subtle flaws. Her enterprise dazzled with showy ambition and bold marketing, but beneath the gloss lay cracks a lack of true executive coaching expertise, superficial client engagement tactics, and a strategy keen on quick results rather than sustainable growth. Within these gaps, I saw opportunity. My own background in business administration, long hibernating but not forgotten, reawakened as I scrutinized each detail. Though the market had evolved, the principles of prudent management and strategic growth remained steadfast. I began jotting down notes, allowing old skills to mesh with fresh ambition. This was no mere rivalry. It was an act of reclamation, restoring my identity, my voice, and my respect. The question of allies soon became clear. Miriam, a trusted friend and sharp businesswoman, emerged as an essential partner. I crafted a careful message, inviting her to join this venture without revealing too much too soon. The wait for her reply felt endless. When she returned my call with enthusiastic support, it was a soothing balm to my resolve. Together, we would step into the light, no longer restrained by shadows. Meeting Miriam in a quiet cafe, the air thick with the scent of rain and brewed coffee, was a balm for my soul. We reminisced over past endeavors and mapped out new strategies. Her sharp intellect and straightforward manner complemented my patient strength. It reminded me how power often dwells quietly, steadfast and unyielding, rather than screaming for attention. We spoke at length about the gaps in the executive coaching industry, a world Jessica barely skimmed. Her focus was short-sighted, fixated on immediate profit and rapid expansion. Yet a demand was growing for deeper leadership transformation, something more holistic and enduring. Empowered coaching, I said aloud, the name taking on a heartbeat of its own, a reflection of my journey from silence to power. The pieces of our plan took shape: branding that breathed quiet confidence, digital marketing that appealed with subtle conviction, and a client approach steeped in trust and empathy. My public persona would blend the wisdom of a caregiver with the precision of a strategist. This was not merely a business. It was a statement that silent strength could carve out an undeniable presence. Long nights stretched before me, filled with careful drafting of mission statements, service descriptions, and brand narratives. Each word whispered defiance against the dismissal I had endured. Excitement mingled with nervous anticipation as I built this hushed rebellion, a venture carved out of years of restraint and quiet hope. Within the family, I resumed my role as the steady matriarch, a calm presence amid chaos. My smile remained gentle, words considerate, but my awareness sharpened. I noted every flicker of irritation in Jessica's eyes when business was mentioned, every sidelong glance Nathan cast when family finances came up. These subtle signs were my secret clues, fragments of a puzzle I intended to solve with precision. Jessica's leadership, though forceful, bred isolation. Potential partners saw her ambition but felt little warmth or trust. My approach, rooted in patience and understanding, would build relationships where she burned bridges. This contrast became the fulcrum of my plan. I began reaching out to local businesses and nonprofit organizations, exploring partnerships eager to invest in coaching that valued personal growth as much as professional success. I compiled targeted lists of executives, exhausted leaders craving authentic guidance, seeking steady hands to steer them through turbulent times. Miriam and I fine-tuned financial forecasts, balancing aspiration with realism. My secret savings were a gift from the past, now a foundation for independence. No external funding would dilute my authority. This was a venture created entirely on my terms, born from decades of silent determination, days blurred into a dance of dual roles. Each morning, I brewed tea and kept family company, the comfort of routine disguising the extraordinary shift underway beneath. This double life became a game of strategic dance where every move was thoughtful and uncompromising. One afternoon at Miriam's office, sunlight streaming in, we dove into specifics: marketing funnels, client outreach, digital SEO strategies. It was a subtle war of presence and perception, a far cry from the noisy battles I had long avoided. Reflecting on my early days managing communications for community groups, I marveled at how those skills now served as quiet weapons in this fight. The logo and website slowly emerged, deep navy blue, soft gold accents, colors symbolizing both calm strength and lasting value. The mission statement was my soul laid bare: to empower through patience, wisdom, and thoughtful leadership. Industry circles began to whisper of empowered coaching. A discreet website here, a steady social media presence there, clients sharing testimonials quietly but with sincerity. The name appeared in conferences where Jessica had once dominated, a silent but growing rival. Each time I caught Jessica's sharp glance toward my emerging presence, satisfaction bloomed within me. Not bitter or vengeful, but a calm pride in reclaiming a place that was mine by right. My heart no longer spilled bitterness but rested in certainty. This was not revenge but restoration, years of silencing transformed into a quiet, unstoppable force. I was Eleanor Harris, mother, grandmother, and woman, shaped by patience and silent resolve, ready for the next move. The game had begun anew, and I was no longer invisible. Launching empowered coaching became a delicate dance across two worlds, the quiet rigor of a new venture unfolding beneath the familiar rhythms of home life. Each morning, I rose with the stillness of routine, pouring tea for family, exchanging gentle smiles, listening to the patter of grandchildren's footsteps. To those around me, life went on as usual, but beneath the surface, a transformation was gathering strength, quiet but merciless in its intent. My days soon segmented into carefully allocated pockets: mornings for familial duties, afternoons and evenings for the fragile birth of a business. Meetings, phone calls, emails, and countless hours of research consumed me in ways the women before me had not been allowed or dared to explore. I learned to wield patience not just as endurance, but as precision, knowing when to speak and when silence would do more damage than words ever could. It was a sharper weapon than any raised voice. Crafting a digital presence demanded a nuanced approach. Each social media post became a quiet invitation directed to leaders weighed down by responsibility, a lifeline thrown to executives worn thin by the demands of corner offices and boardrooms. I understood their isolation, the loneliness of command, the pressure to perform flawlessly. Empowered coaching was designed as a haven, a place for those exhausted by success to find renewal and strength in measured steps. The marketing campaigns unfurled in soft waves, never loud but carefully targeted. A video series offered insight into mindful leadership, blending the strategic with the compassionate. Workshops, subtly promoted to select audiences, built credibility not by volume but through authenticity. Growth came steadily, rewarded by patience and perseverance rather than flashy announcements. At home, I upheld the image of the composed matriarch, a rock amid shifting sands. I maintained the traditions that bound our family, smiled through veiled jabs, absorbed Jessica's clipped comments and Nathan's distracted presence without disruption. They saw me as the same old mother-in-law, but I was no longer the silent victim. A new woman pulsed beneath that placid exterior, quietly carving out a space neither had anticipated. Still, moments of solitude brought their own shadows. The loneliness of secrecy pressed down, reminding me that strength often exacts a toll. Miriam's steady presence and wisdom proved indispensable. Together, we navigated the challenging terrain of business development, refining our strategy and guarding our shared vision. She was the beacon guiding me through unfamiliar waters. Word of mouth began its slow orbit, softly but surely encircling the executive community. Client testimonials arrived like whispered affirmation stories of transformation, balance regained, leadership reborn. These quiet victories nourished the soul of empowered coaching and reaffirmed my path. This was more than a business. It was a measured upheaval. Family dynamics began to shift, subtle cracks appearing in Jessica's armor. There were glances at her phone that faltered, moments when her confident smile was replaced by uncertainty. Nathan's conversations drifted toward industry challenges, a vocabulary that had previously been foreign. Like ripples widening from a stone cast in still water, the power balance showed signs of change. The strength of a woman patient yet unyielding was quietly rewriting the family narrative. There was no need for reckless confrontation. Success presented itself not as a sudden blast but a steady glow, steadily illuminating the corners where I had long gone unnoticed. The patterns that had marginalized me began to unravel, carefully but irrevocably. A defining moment arrived during a crucial boardroom presentation for a promising partnership. I faced a room of seasoned executives accustomed to grandstanding and bravado. Instead, I offered calm confidence and methodical clarity. The shift in energy was palpable. Conversation deepened, skepticism dissolved into interest. Miriam's approving glance was the unspoken acknowledgement of my leap forward. This venture demanded sacrifices, absences from family meals, missed moments with grandchildren, and emotional distance born of necessity. Yet each sacrifice was a thread woven into a legacy far larger than individual hardship, a legacy of endurance, empowerment, and renewal. Every milestone fueled a growing belief in the power of patience and silent strength. Within me, resilience had morphed from mere survival into a formidable force tempered by grace. The journey was not about overshadowing Jessica or Nathan, but reclaiming a presence that was rightfully mine. I envisioned family gatherings no longer shadowed by tension and dismissiveness, but filled with mutual respect and acknowledgement. The story I had lived so quietly would finally emerge fully, side by side with theirs. The power I wielded was not in loud declarations, but a reassertion of worth born from years of silent observation and steady effort. At the heart of this transformation was an enduring love for family, for legacy, and an unshakable conviction in my own intrinsic worth. Each choice, each quiet maneuver, was a step towards reclaiming my rightful place, a testament to a woman no longer content to fade into the background. Now, standing at the threshold of this new chapter, I faced forward with a strength that could not be muted. The silence I once bore as a burden had become my armor, my patience my sword. In this quietude lay an unyielding power waiting to be unleashed. I was Eleanor Harris' mother, grandmother, strategist, silent force, fully awake, fully prepared, and ready to embrace whatever the future held. The game had evolved, and I was no longer invisible. Jessica returned from the conference with a quiet storm swirling beneath her composed facade. The air shifted the moment she stepped into our next family gathering. Her usual assured demeanor wavered just enough for me to catch at those quick flickers of uncertainty hidden behind carefully controlled expressions. The murmurs I'd heard outside family walls about empowered coaching had reached her ears. My silent presence was stirring ripples in waters she had long considered her domain. Nathan, caught in the middle of divergent loyalties, appeared restless. His eyes betrayed the unease that tugged at him, caught between his wife's ambitions and the undeniable change unfolding right in front of him. Though he said little, his tentative glances suggested a growing realization he struggled to reconcile. At the table, the usual comfortable rhythm was broken. Conversations were clipped, eyes darted, and silence hung heavily between words unspoken. Jessica and I sat on opposite ends of an invisible line, a silent rivalry held in cautious tension. Her sharp gaze sought to unnerve, but I met it with a calm she could not pierce. Nathan, trying to mediate, ventured carefully into conversation. Jessica's recent decisions have been difficult, he said, his voice tethered with hesitation but firm in intent. The statement was a quiet jab, an acknowledgement of cracks appearing behind Jessica's confident front. I made no immediate response. Instead, I slid a thick folder across toward Nathan, a carefully organized trove of documents that told the story of my own venture's growth. Growth steady and sustainable, underscored by client testimonials, financial statements, and marketing strategies that spoke of a presence no longer invisible. Jessica's eyes widened despite herself, flickering between astonishment and reluctant recognition. She struggled to maintain composure as I offered a whispered remark with deliberate softness. "You taught me well, darling." The room stilled under the weight of revelation. It was a moment where years of unseen labor confronted years of dismissiveness and doubt. Their disbelief was raw, etched on their faces, as they comprehended that the quiet woman they had underestimated was now a formidable force to reckon with. Jessica's expression shifted, bitterness mixed with a grudging respect. Nathan's conflicted gaze revealed a personal battle, his birthplace torn between protection of his wife and acknowledgement of his mother's resilience. The grandchildren, silent observers, instinctively retreated from the gravity of the change unfolding around them. That charged silence was freedom for me. Every moment of invisibility, every wound inflicted by dismissal and sarcasm dissolved into validation. I had not needed to shout or confront with anger. Instead, patience and strategy had rewritten the narrative. The silent are not powerless, they simply wait for the moment their strength speaks louder than words. After the gathering broke, a subtle but real distance emerged between Jessica and Nathan. Their bond, once so solid, began to fray under the weight of this new reality, a symbolic withdrawal that reminded me the family dynamic was shifting irrevocably. In the days that followed, I found steadiness in the aftermath of this asymmetrical confrontation. No clashes, no battle cries, just quiet acknowledgement. Silence was my armor still, patience my weapon, and irrefutable truth my banner. The weight of years I once felt as a burden now was my foundation. I had changed, and in doing so, I had changed everything around me. The house remained the same, but I was no longer the woman who sat quietly in its corners. Jessica's attempts to undermine me waned as the reality of my success grew impossible to dismiss. Nathan's ambivalence softened, though the wounds left by distance and neglect remained. Healing would take time, but the path was clear. Above all, I grasped a profound truth. Power often blooms quietly beneath the surface, gathering strength in silence and patience until the moment of revelation arrives. I had reclaimed my voice, my story, not by shouting over others, but by standing stronger and surer than ever before. The quiet storm I had wrought was only beginning, and I faced the future with resolve tempered by grace, patient, vigilant, and unyielding. The morning light crept softly into my new office, casting gentle shadows across the neat stacks of papers and framed affirmations from clients who had found strength through empowered coaching. Each item on the walls told a story, one of resilience, growth, and transformation. Sitting there, surrounded by these quiet testaments to my journey, I felt a calmness I had not known in years. The heavy cloak of invisibility had finally been lifted. In this space, I was not the sidelined mother-in-law, but Eleanor Harris, in command, respected, and empowered. Though the physical house remained unchanged, the atmosphere within it shifted subtly yet profoundly. Family gatherings, once filled with tension and thinly veiled dismissiveness, grew quieter with Jessica and Nathan's gradual withdrawal. Their absence carved an unexpected space, one I filled with new connections and strength. The laughter of grandchildren echoed through those moments, warming wounds I had thought too deep to heal. Their giggles and questions became the gentle pulse of a life renewed, a reminder of what truly mattered. Alone in my office, I reflected on the winding path that had brought me here. Each tear shed in silence, every laugh stifled within, and all the sacrifices I had made now felt less like losses and more like bricks laid to build a new foundation. My smile was no longer fragile. It was an expression of hard-won peace and pride. I had rewritten my story, chapter by chapter, with unwavering patience and deliberate strength. Financial independence, once a distant dream tethered to fear, now breathed fresh life between my hands. The keys to this office symbolized more than access. They stood for freedom, control, and quiet justice. These documents I signed were no longer dictated by others but carefully crafted by me, reflecting choices born from confidence. Justice had not come in fiery battles but in steadfast endurance and grace. I thought about the future, the unknown challenges that undoubtedly awaited, but for the first time, I faced them with open eyes and a steady heart. My story would no longer be written in the margins or whispered behind closed doors. It was mine, boldly etched in the present, ready to shape what was yet to come. Looking out the window, I welcomed the warmth of the morning sun, feeling it as a silent acknowledgement of transformation. I was visible now, not just in the eyes of others but in my own. That visibility held a power that was both gentle and unshakable, born of years spent cultivating quiet resilience. In this new chapter, I found not just success but profound peace. I was no longer a shadow in my own family's story but its quiet, steady heart. Eleanor Harris, mother, grandmother, strategist, stood firmly in her truth. The unwritten pages ahead, filled with promise and hope, belonged to me now, and I embraced them with open arms and an unyielding spirit.